How did it go on your side? Can you talk us through it?
Yeah, very frustrating session. I mean, first the toggle, then unfortunately when I had a good lap, I lost half a second in the back straight for whatever reason on the second lap in SQ3. So we'll analyze that and try to understand what has gone wrong.
Did you imagine that in just his second Grand Prix with Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton was going to be able to surprise not only Charles Leclerc, but also Frédéric Vasseur himself inside the Maranello garage? Because that was exactly what happened in the Chinese Grand Prix sprint qualifying. A session where the margin for error was practically non-existent, where there had only been one free practice to understand the car, and where Hamilton ended up executing a lap that left everyone looking at the time monitor in disbelief. Nobody expected that the Briton could adapt so quickly to the Ferrari. Much less that in such a demanding session he managed to place himself ahead of Leclerc, the driver who for years has been the team's absolute reference when it comes to squeezing in a fast lap. But Hamilton did it. And it wasn't just any return. It was a precise, aggressive, almost perfect lap. One of those that only appear when a driver feels that the car responds exactly the way he wants. A lap that made it clear that the 7-time world champion is beginning to understand how to unlock the true potential of the Ferrari. Something that not even his own teammates seemed capable of achieving at the time. The most surprising thing is that this comes just after a difficult start to the season for Ferrari, where they were still trying to understand the true performance of the car and adjust its behavior. But in Shanghai something changed. Hamilton found that connection with the car, and when that happens, we all know how dangerous it can be. And that opens a question that within Ferrari is beginning to resonate more and more strongly. Are we seeing the beginning of the real Hamilton dressed in red? Or was it just a momentary flash in a chaotic session? The sprint classification of the Chinese Grand Prix took place in a very particular context that helps to understand why Lewis Hamilton's return had such an impact within Ferrari. The sprint format forces teams to work practically against the clock, since there is only one free practice session before facing qualifying directly. This means that the scope to understand the car, adjust the setup or correct problems is extremely limited. In other words, when push comes to shove, drivers must rely almost entirely on their feel with the car and their ability to quickly adapt to track conditions. That was precisely the scenario that was experienced in Shanghai. The day began with a single practice where the teams tried to gather as much information as possible. The track presented particular conditions with relatively high temperatures on the asphalt and harder tires selected for this circuit, which generated difficulties for many drivers when it came to bringing the compounds to the correct operating window. This caused several teams to struggle to find the right balance between grip, temperature, and car stability during fast laps. In the midst of this context, Ferrari arrived with many unknowns. After a start to the season where the team's performance had raised doubts, the main objective of Friday in China was to better understand the behavior of the car and confirm if they could really compete at the top of the grid. Charles Leclerc was still the natural reference within the team when it came to a qualifying lap, while Lewis Hamilton was still in the process of adapting to his new surroundings after having spent so many years at Mercedes. But from the first signs of the day, something different began to be noticed in the Briton's behavior. Hamilton began to show signs that he was finding a better connection with the Ferrari. His driving looked more natural, more fluid, and above all he conveyed a sense of confidence that had been absent in some recent moments of his career. That change, although subtle at first, was to become one of the key factors of what was to happen later in the standings. When the first phase of sprint qualifying began, the challenge was immediate. According to the regulations of this format, all drivers had to use medium tires in the first part of the session. This added an extra element of difficulty, as the medium compound does not always offer the same level of initial grip as the soft, forcing drivers to carefully manage lap preparation to obtain maximum performance at the exact moment. It was precisely in that first moment where Hamilton began to send a clear message to the rest of the grid. The Briton set the fastest time of the opening session, showing that he was not only comfortable with the car, but was also able to extract speed from it from the first serious attempt at qualifying. This detail was very significant because, in such limited preparation conditions, the ability to adapt quickly is usually one of the greatest strengths of the most experienced pilots. While Hamilton found that competitive rhythm, the session also began to reveal the difficulties of other teams. Some drivers struggled to maintain control of their cars on a circuit that required absolute precision around every corner. Others simply couldn't find the correct window of tire operation, losing valuable time in key sections of the track. In this type of sessions, every small mistake can make the difference between advancing to the next round or being eliminated. Ferrari watched all this carefully from the wall. The team knew that sprint qualifying was an important opportunity to confirm whether the car really had the potential they had begun to see in the data. And at that moment Hamilton was showing that at least some of that potential did exist. Meanwhile, Charles Leclerc seemed to experience a much more difficult session. The Monégasque could not find the same level of confidence in the car and began to report certain difficulties in feeling comfortable at key moments in qualifying. Although it was still competitive, the difference in sensations between both drivers was beginning to become evident. And that was the first moment in which an unexpected sensation began to arise inside the Ferrari garage. Because if Hamilton was really starting to understand how to extract the car's full potential, then the team's internal balance could change much faster than anyone had imagined at the start of the season. As the sprint qualifying progressed into its decisive phases, tension within the paddock began to clearly increase. These types of sessions are especially intense because each round reduces the room for maneuver. A small mistake in a corner, poor tire preparation, or even a little traffic on the track can completely ruin the fastest lap attempt. And when it comes to the last phase, each driver knows that he will only have one real opportunity to demonstrate his full potential. Ferrari arrived at that moment with a fairly positive feeling, but also with many unknowns. The car looked competitive, however it was still unclear to what extent they could fight against direct rivals. In the garage there was some caution because the car's behavior had been sensitive to configuration changes during the day, something that could make the difference in the final phase of qualifying. Inside the Ferrari wall, Frédéric Vasseur watched the data carefully. The team boss knew perfectly well that what had just happened could have important implications for the development of the season. If Hamilton had already found a way to exploit the car's potential in qualifying, it meant that Ferrari could count on an extremely powerful weapon in sessions where every thousandth counts. But at the same time a new question also arose within the team. Because if Hamilton was starting to reach that level of performance, then the internal dynamics with Leclerc could start to change. For years the Monégasque had been Ferrari's natural leader when it came to fast laps. Now, for the first time in a long time, a companion appeared capable of directly challenging that hierarchy. And that detail did not go unnoticed by anyone inside the garage. Because when a driver like Hamilton begins to feel comfortable in a competitive car, the history of Formula One has taught us that his performance can escalate to a level that is extremely difficult to match. Sprint qualifying was over, but the real fun began after the cars returned to the garage. Because when the engineers began to review the data and compare the laps of both drivers, it became clear within Ferrari that what Lewis Hamilton had done had not simply been good punctual execution. There was something more behind that turn. The data showed that Hamilton had managed to maximize the car's performance at several key points on the circuit, especially during long braking and cornering where the balance of the car could become delicate. In those sectors the Briton had been able to maintain a higher minimum speed and emerge with greater traction, allowing him to build the advantage that ultimately placed him ahead of Charles Leclerc. And when engineers analyzed the telemetry in more detail, they realized something important. Hamilton was using the car in a slightly different way. Of course, it's still too early to draw definitive conclusions about what may happen during the rest of the season. A single classification, even one as impressive as this, does not completely define the hierarchy within a team or the final result of a championship. But what he did make clear on Friday in Shanghai is that Hamilton is much closer than many thought to reaching his best level with Ferrari. And if that trend continues in the upcoming races, Ferrari could find itself in a very interesting situation. Because for the first time in a long time the team would not depend solely on one driver to fight at the front of the grid. I would have two drivers capable of making a difference. But what really makes this story so interesting is a question that is beginning to arise among fans and within the paddock itself. The sprint classification of the Chinese Grand Prix ended up leaving something much more important than a simple position on the grid. What really became clear is that Lewis Hamilton is beginning to find his place within Ferrari. And when a driver of his caliber begins to feel comfortable with the car, the consequences can be enormous for the entire championship. The lap he made in Shanghai was not just fast. It was a demonstration of experience, control, and adaptation in an extremely complicated context. With just one practice session to prepare for the weekend and with a car that is still in the development process, Hamilton was able to produce a lap that surprised even within the team itself. A lap that left Charles Leclerc behind and forced Ferrari to look at the data very carefully. For Ferrari, this performance has a very important meaning. The team needed to confirm that Hamilton's arrival could bring something different, a new way of understanding the car and exploiting its performance. And what was seen in China was exactly that. The Briton began to show that he can unlock the potential of the car in a way that is still evolving within the team. And that opens up a fascinating scenario for the rest of the championship, because Ferrari could end up having one of the most competitive duos on the entire grid. Two drivers capable of pushing the team forward, two different driving styles, and two ways of understanding the car that could help accelerate the development of the project. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.